Well, whether you are in the pinnacle of joy or the depths of despair, take heart. The Joe and Joe Weather Show is on, and that should make you happy.
Yeah,
Hi, everybody. Joe Rayo to my left, and I'm Joe Chaffee.
that's right. Here we are.
Yes.
Here we are.
I'm already
Uh,
halfway through my obligatory glass of wine during the live streams. So,
and what else can I what else? Oh, there you are. What else can I tell you, Joe? We already don't know, except that it's hot and it's humid, and it looks like even though we have been hearing reports in some circles that the humidity is going to go down, it's going to feel a lot better. Don't believe it because oh yeah, it's going to go down, but it's going to go down like begrudgingly over the next few
well,
days.
enough that maybe you should be able to notice a little bit of a change. We have an early super chat hit from Steve Lapointe, and we thank Steve very very much.
We've
Let
only been on for like 1 minute, and we already got a
I
lot of
know,
super.
we're riveting. They're just throwing dollars at us. But
Yeah.
thanks a lot. Thank you, Steve. Let me just do a little quick housekeeping. The show tonight will, of course, be available as a podcast, and you can find that on Anchor, on Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. And I think we're on iTunes. Although I've seen some people have been watching us on iTunes, though I haven't been officially been notified by Apple, Joe, that our podcasts are on iTunes. And what else did I want to say? Well, not too much. I guess I'm in good shape. And Johnny Quest is just to hit super chat tonight. We thank you, Johnny. Really, you at least got your rowboat to dry. I hope after all the rain that you've had over the last week or so. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. Of course, attention focusing on potential tropical cyclone 9, which is east of the Leeward Islands, and they started doing this at the Hurricane Center last year. I was a little bit leery about it at first. I had questions, but I think the concept has actually worked pretty well. I believe I can only recall one instance where they came out with a potential tropical cyclone that did not wind up eventually becoming a tropical storm. Uh, so far so good, and they do this when they think that something stands a very good chance of becoming a tropical cyclone, and basically, I guess the best way to describe it is when you look at the satellite, you look at the wind data and everything else, it's about three-quarters of the way there. There just needs one little extra step.
Oomph.
Yeah, either the center, either the center has to close off. Actually, more often than not, it's waiting for the center to close off, or as you have in a situation like this, where you have a very broad center of circulation. You may have noticed on the satellite, Joe. It looks like there's almost been a gigantic donut hole in between two areas of convection, one to the east and one to the west. And we're just basically waiting for that to tighten up and get convection to form around where the lowest pressure is, and then they'll make it a tropical storm.
Yeah, and interestingly, Joe, is that several days ago, several models, most notably the GFS, carried this thing. Really held it as a potential tropical cyclone all the way up to the North Carolina coast, and now the models are a bit more anomalous, if you will, in their projection as to. Are you all right?
Yeah, no, I had a
Need a
mute.
sip of water or something
No,
to?
no, I muted myself.
Oh,
I had a piece of dust in my throat,
okay.
and that dust
Fine.
was a gift from
Good.
from a very dusty room. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but what I'm saying is that it looked on the longer range models a few days ago like it was really holding together, and you could say, "Oh, look, is that a hurricane?" And now you could see initially that they're showing that, but then it kind of becomes more amorphous, if you will, more diffuse, especially as it gets close to
I,
Florida.
I tend to I think this is a very complex. Having looked at everything today, and I made sure I took the time to look at everything I could get my hands on. With
Including the no gaps.
No, that I won't ever do. No,
I looked.
there are
I looked
certain
at the no
things.
gaps.
There are
I
certain
looked at the no
lines I
gaps.
will not cross, and one of them is the no gaps model. I just have no use for that at all.
I looked at the Navy no gaps model last night, and they had what on this particular model, the no gaps model, they had what looked to be like a Category 3 storm making landfall along the east coast of Florida on Sunday. So,
Well, I did look at for the first time, and it'll be interesting to see how it does, is the parallel GFS. Now, for those of you who don't know, the parallel GFS, when we have a parallel GFS, it runs parallel to the regular GFS. And what's happening is they're doing an upgrade. So eventually the parallel GFS will replace the current GFS, and supposedly it's supposed to be better than the GFS that we've got now. But the last time they did an upgrade, if you recall, it wound up being a bit of a disaster. There was something wrong with the GFS model, and they had to go in and fine tune it. So we'll see how it does. The scenario, Joe, no doubt in my mind, is very complicated. You've got four working, what I always usually refer to as puzzle pieces. You have a ridge and three shortwave troughs. You have an alleyway that's going to try to set up along the East Coast. On top of that, you're going to have a stalled front in the Southeast late this week and this weekend. It's probably not going to be ideal conditions for strengthening. So there are a lot of balls being juggled here. And the first thing is that we is really to get this thing to close off, because I think that will at least reduce a little bit of the uncertainty. If it stays weak, it's going to respond more to the low level easterlies and wind up pushing its way into the Northeast Caribbean. And the way the European model had it today, just kind of rips right across all the big islands,
right.
over Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, the Greater Antilles, which basically would rip it. The mountains on a track like that would just absolutely rip it apart.
Now,
Now,
I know how I know that the Hurricane Center forecasters are concerned. You know how I know that they're concerned? Because this isn't even a tropical cyclone officially yet. And yet, if you go on their site, NHC, and read the technical discussion, it's
which I
about twice
did.
as it's about twice as long as a discussion normally would read for something that has already developed and something that's already formed. In other words, they already seeing what you just mentioned, Joe, that it's going to interact with some of those islands and also possibly make its way toward Florida. And they just want to keep stressing over and over and over again, don't follow the exact track. This hasn't developed
Right.
yet. Not sure. We're not sure. Blah, blah, blah. But they made it again. The discussion was twice as long. I said they wouldn't spend this much time writing up a discussion this long if they weren't concerned.
Well,
And
I also think from the standpoint of strength, if it tracks, if we wind up, first things first is you got to close off a center, and it has to become stronger than this in order for it to be relevant. So we should point that out off the bat. The other thing is, if you wind up with a track that say it is on the northern end of the guidance envelope, where you got all the hurricane model tracks, if it winds up being on the northern end of that track, uh, it's not a whole lot of mileage, but it might be the difference in terms of what it has to deal with once it goes up, once it heads up, say, into the Bahamas. If it's further out offshore, conditions may be, let's say, conditions may not exactly be ideal for strengthening, but they may wind up being less unfavorable. Maybe that's the best way to put it. So let's why don't we start off? We'll bring up some maps. I think we'll take care of all of this, and before we start going into the local weather over the next couple of days. And I'm going to start off, Joseph, with the interactive um, tracking map that everybody can get from the nhc.noaa.gov to take a look. If you want to bring it up yourselves, folks, you can, and just kind of follow along while I've got it here on the full screen. And I'll be adding some elements along the way. So this is the forecast track of the potential tropical cyclone. Tropical storm warnings are up for the Leeward Islands. They're up for the Virgin Islands. They're up for Puerto Rico. And we have a tropical storm watch up for the Dominican Republic. Not for Haiti, just for the Dominican Republic. And you can see the Hurricane Center's track is pretty much west-northwest, moves relatively quickly, moves across the northern Leeward Islands. I often wish, Joe, when they do these maps, they would put a little bit more geography. It actually takes it very close to or just to the north of the island of Guadeloupe, and then it moves on northwestward from there, west northwestward from there through the U.S. Virgin Islands, and then right into Puerto Rico as a tropical storm. Now, again, this is the forecast track. It's not written gospel yet. And the timing of this would be actually for Puerto Rico, be arriving, say, Wednesday, sometime around 8 p.m. as far as the winds are concerned. And then, of course, moving right along, it takes it north of the Dominican Republic into the southern Bahamas, and at least on its latest forecast track, they do bring it into South Florida. But notice the cone, the I keep wanting to call it the cone of shame, but it's not. Especially because you and I have both pointed out, and it's worth pointing out again, that the Hurricane Center's track forecasts have gotten very, very good, even out to 5 days. They really minimize the mileage error.
And they do that, and they do that without a Sharpie too.
Yes, they do,
Yeah.
very, very much so. And of course, the variability here. If it's a weaker storm, you're going to see it wind up being on the southern end of this envelope. If it's a stronger system, you're going to wind up seeing it on the northern part of this forecast track. And with regards to, I'm just going to back it up here. So we'll add. I'll throw up the watches that are up, all in blue. There are no storm surge watches or warnings. And here's the initial radii of gales. And going forward, as we put on the area of gales, you see the probability of, I'm guessing that the yellow and orange areas are 40 to 50%. I just want to see if they have that up here on the scale, and they do. So starting with you start to get into the browner colors, that's where the 50% starts. And when you see the red, 70% probability of 34 knot winds. And with regards to 50 knots, right now, relatively low probability because, frankly, it's under 20%. And it's because we don't really know what we're dealing with at this point. What is it going to be when it moves toward these islands? How much strength will it get or won't it get? Again, all part of the variables that we're dealing with here tonight.
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of variables, and of course, any one of those islands that we're watching has terrain which, if the the potential tropical system passes over, will certainly cause a bit of a weakening, especially if it somehow manages to get all the way up to the Dominican Republic or Haiti. Uh, those mountains are what, 12, 14,000 feet high,
Yeah,
and they have,
they do a great job at ripping the circulation apart.
right.
Joe Rayo is monitoring the chat board, by the way. So if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them on the live chat board. You can
And
join that chat with your Gmail account and subscribing to my YouTube channel, and have at it. The
Robert,
questions, comments,
Robert,
whatever you like.
Robert Russo, thank you for hitting super chats. So we've got three people already hitting super chats. I don't know what we're doing right tonight, Joe.
Well, whatever it is, let's keep doing it. Here's the Hurricane Center's forecast map, of course, from 5 p.m. tonight, which you have the tropical storm just taking on up to the west northwest. You see where the watches and warnings. 14.4, 55.9 maximum sustained winds at the moment, 40 miles per hour, moving west northwest, 285 degrees at 23 miles an hour, 21 knots. So that means it moves about 1 degree west every 3 hours or so. So it's moving at a fairly good clip here.
Yeah, it's sailing along, a good forward motion, and that means that even if it were to become entangled in some of those higher terrain mountainous regions, let's say of Dominican Republic or Haiti, if it just keeps on moving, the sheer momentum will take it off and away from those mountains, and it could very quickly regain strength after losing strength. So it'll be one to watch in the next several days.
This is the recon from late this afternoon that the Hurricane Center quoted in their discussion. Now, when I saw this earlier this afternoon, the area of winds here, the light green, the wind bars that you see, the light greens are 40 to 45 knots. They had instead a belt of 50 to 70 knot winds being indicated north and west of what they thought were the center, but it looked a little suspect. Turns out it was bad data, so they replotted this, and now it's correct. So we're looking at winds running the top winds, and they weren't able to really close off a tight center. And you know that because of the fact that usually when the recon aircraft is out here, you'll see pressure points that are labeled on the map, and they make a second or third pass so they could actually see how the plane is actually tracking the storm and reporting that back to the hurricane center. But they were only able to find what looks like a relatively broad center of low pressure, and this is the issue with respect to whether this is a tropical storm at this point, or if we're dealing with how they have it labeled, which is a potential tropical cyclone. Now, here's the wide satellite loop, and if you think back to yesterday, that donut hole in the middle, Joe, looks like it's closing up to an extent. There's more convection that is forming north and west of the circulation center. It still looks, fairly broad, but there is more convection here. So I'm guessing that as we go through overnight, if the trend continues as it gets a little bit better organized during the overnight hours, that if not tonight, maybe as sometime tomorrow morning, you might see this get named Isaias.
Well, I now, my wife, she's gone now. She went up to do an errand.
Oh, good. We could talk about her then.
But Lonnie Quinn mentioned the correct pronunciation of this storm, this I storm.
Is it Isaias or no?
It's not. It's and I don't even remember how to pronounce it now. I should have written it down phonetically. It's a French name, and it's no. Why don't we just say it's the
Isaiah? Why don't you look on the hurricanes? I can't bring it up because I got the maps up. But if you bring up the Hurricane Center page and bring up the tropical cyclone names, I think they have the phonetic pronunciation of it.
Right.
So you do that. I'm going to just finish up with this map. You see the thing. It is definitely turning. I mean, there's no question that there's a circulation here. It's just that, again, it is just still relatively broad. Also, by the way, I want you to notice that we were talking a couple of weeks ago about how all the convection was down close to the equator or south of 5 degrees north. Well, now we're seeing that migration of these waves further north as they come off the African coast, and that makes development of these waves. It doesn't make them likely, but it certainly increases the possibility that something could develop here when you have the waves coming out further north. And we actually do have another halfway decent looking wave here that's south and west of the Cabo Verde Islands, and it looks like there's yet another tropical wave beginning to move off the African coast. And it's not to say that either of those are going to develop down the road, but we are seeing increased activity. Once they come off, then they're dependent on how conditions are across the tropical Atlantic. Were we able to find it?
Yes, the pronunciation, the Atlantic Basin storm name pronunciation for this storm is Isaiah. Wait a minute, Isaias.
Isaias?
It puts the stress on the double E. Eas. Oh, why did they?
Isaias.
EES.
Oh my God! The so-called lamestream media is going to have a field day with this one.
EES hyphen AH hyphen double E capitalized uppercase hyphen AHS.
Well, maybe perhaps because we have such a big audience, perhaps someone from the French side of Saint Martin might be able to help us out with this. Okay.
I might point out.
And by the way, what I was just saying before about name pronunciation, I'm real touchy about it because I can tell you my last name has been butchered in so many ways over my life. So I get it, and I really try to make an effort to make sure I get the name pronunciation correct. But let's see if someone comes up on the chat board and maybe can help us out with this.
I might point out that the I storm in future years will be a lot easier. Next year, it's Ida. Oh, I can pronounce that.
Ida.
2022, it's Ian.
Okay.
2023, it's, oh no. 2023, it's Idalia.
Idalia. Okay, we
Idalia.
could do that.
2024 is Isaac. 2025 is Imelda. And
No,
that's as far as
Imelda's
we go.
retired. I thought they retired Imelda.
Well, it's on this
They haven't
spreadsheet.
corrected. I think Imelda's getting retired. All
Yeah.
right. Here's a tight view, so you can get a close up shot here of our tropical system. So at this stage of the game, we're just going to have to wait to see what the next recon finds and where they go from here. So I have a
And I've been,
couple of.
we're being told by our people on the chat board that it is Spanish, not French. And yeah, Ashante Stevens says it's Spanish, not French. And what else? It's a Spanish version of Isaiah, says bad weather freak. Bad weather freak?
All
That's
right.
new.
You know what? I'm going to send a message to my buddy Stalin. Remember Stalin?
Stalin.
Stalin always said that he had my back.
Okay.
And Stalin is from the Dominican Republic, and he'll know. So I'll
Okay.
message him and I'll ask him how to pronounce it. So I brought up, and by the way, you can look at a lot of the stuff that I bring up with these hurricane maps. You can find very easily on tropicaltidbits.com, which for you weather fiends out there, that should be your go-to site for weather models and everything else. But Joe, these are I brought up the GFS, the GEFS ensembles, which were pretty interesting because when you look at them and you look at the members, the vast majority of them take it. The mean is just off the east coast of Florida, but you've got more models, more variations of the GFS taking it east of the mean and offshore and up the coast, as opposed to taking it westward and southward over Cuba and over the Dominican Republic and Cuba and into the northeastern Gulf of Mexico.
Yes. Excuse me, Joe.
No, no,
I
you
think
got the same wad of dust that I had.
yeah.
But it's interesting that the GFS ensembles are supportive of the latest GFS run and what the parallel GFS run is doing, which we're going to get to in a little bit.
See, I get a little concerned when we show a model, when we show a map like this, Joe, because now there are going to be people out there saying, "Hey, did you know we saw a map tonight? It has it coming right up the eastern seaboard. New York City's going to get hit a direct
But
hit by it."
those who watch this show regularly know the context. They
Yeah.
understand the context of what we're doing, do they
Well,
not?
most people do.
No, they
Yeah.
do. Those that watch the show know.
I mean,
Uh,
they post. There are some people out there who post a map like this on their Facebook page, and then they say, "Now this is not a forecast, and I didn't make this forecast, but I just wanted to show you. If you don't want to show us, don't show it."
Right, but when they do that, they only do it. That's all you see. They just put up the one map. They're not
Right.
like us, or we're running through 100 different things here, and we're
Right.
just kind of at least we're trying. What we try to do, everybody, and as you know, we're just trying to. We want you to get the flavor of what's going to be going on in the upper air, because ultimately that's going to drive all of this, and we're going to get to that. But I just want to give you just a look at everything that we look at, and here's these are the 18Z hurricane models from the Hurricane Center, and I always look for not necessarily where they are, but to see how clustered together they are, because when they are clustered together, it gives you a higher degree of confidence in terms of the outcome, and almost all of them take this north of of the Dominican Republic. Some take it over Puerto Rico. Almost all of them take it over the northern leewards, but then they go north of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and then into the Bahamas, and then somewhere either along the Florida coast or just into South Florida or in the northern Bahamas, somewhere in there by 120 hours. So this at least this lends a little bit of support. If you want to check a box off on the side, does it go north of the islands or south of the islands, or over the islands rather than south? But over the islands or north of the islands, we're going to maybe use the hurricane models and kind of check the box for tracking just north of the islands, which is going to be key to intensity and important to how models in the future are going to handle this as it gets closer to the coast. Now, Joe, speaking of intensity, very interesting here, in my view. So there is, in the wintertime, when it's I mean, they take things to the natural Armageddon conclusion, which is it's going to snow tonight, therefore it must be a blizzard. Okay,
Right.
well, the same kind of goes for the some of the weather folk. They get all wrapped up with tropical systems, and everything becomes a Category 5 hurricane, and that's just not obviously that's not the case. But I just it's interesting to me looking at the intensity model forecast in that at the moment anyway, only one, actually only two of the four, the intensity models, Joe, make this a hurricane. The rest of them, all of the rest of them, make it a tropical storm and basically leave it there. So at least it tells you that if there's something maybe that's not quite right with the upper air uh, along this track, that's going to perhaps prevent this from becoming anything too out of hand. Now, I don't want to discount it completely because that can often adjust relatively quickly, and we saw what happened with Hurricane Michael back a couple of years ago, where we suddenly found ourselves with a Category 5 hurricane going into the Florida Panhandle, even though conditions, when you looked at everything that was going on in terms of the upper air at the time, it didn't appear like it was all that favorable for it to become anything more than maybe a Category 2 hurricane at worst, and it wound up doing what it did. I'm just kind of putting that as a disclaimer because of the high degree of uncertainty.
Right. Right. Well, that's the world we live in, I guess, Joe. What else can I
Well,
say about that?
there's no guarantees. I mean, you and I both we'd love to live in a weather world where you come out with some guarantees. And there never are.
Right.
So on one other clue I thought was interesting, WPC, the forecast of where they have this max precip area. Now you got to be a little careful here because you do have this frontal boundary that's going to be stalling out through the Carolinas late this week. So some of the rain the big rain that you see along the North Carolina coast and then out east northeast is you know some of that is going to be the frontal boundary. But what's interesting to me is that if you follow this on where the max rain area is, I guess I should use a different color just so this way you guys can see it better. I'll try it. Let's try a bright yellow. All right, so let's try that. Okay, so if you follow the max area of precip, I mean, it seems to me like the track would be something like this, where it goes offshore, stays just east of the North Carolina coast, maybe comes very close to Florida, and then runs up northeast from there. Again, this is WPC's early 7-day view is, but
Right.
perhaps they're looking at what's going on. I'm sure they took it into account in terms of their forecast. So initially, maybe that's what they're seeing, that the frontal boundary or whatever weakness there is along the East Coast is going to allow this to eventually turn and move northeastward. Doesn't mean they're right. This is their early look. Now, if we start seeing tomorrow when we update this, if they start shifting that rain area further north and west, then we may be talking a different ballgame.
But don't they talk to each other? I mean, doesn't WPC, somebody get on the phone, say like, get on the phone, call, talk to somebody over at NHC and ask them,
You know what? I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe they do at some point. But I don't know. I don't know that they would talk at this stage of the game.
Well, I do know that if you look at the 7-day outlook, the 7-day progs, surface progs, that they always put that stamp there when they have the position of a tropical cyclone. They always say, please make reference to or refer to the latest updated information from National Hurricane Center. This is just, it's not guesswork, but it's just our interpretation of where this thing is going to go beyond the normal 5-day forecast that NAC puts out.
Well, at least at this early stage, there's enough uncertainty. Everybody's going to have varied opinions. So let's look at the upper air. We've got the 18Z GFS. If the parallel GFS is out, it might be fun to take a look at that. So once again, everything from what we've been talking about through last week remains. You have the big east-west. I'm kind of liking this yellow instead of the red. So we've got this east-west upper high, And of course, there's another east-west upper high back from Texas westward. So you see the weakness in between. We have this upper low, this strong upper low south of James Bay that's dropping down, uh, bringing down maybe some moderate relief to the humidity, if not from the first shot tomorrow when the dew points come down a little bit, but maybe around on Friday and into Saturday when the dew points can come down a little bit more. So the important thing in my view at starting right now is the strength of this ridge that's out in the Atlantic, because that really, Joe, is going to determine how far west it gets. And then it's going to get into this area of weakness, and how it responds to that weakness is going to determine, how much north, how much latitude is this going to gain? How far north is it going to get when it from the Dominican Republic and then into the Bahamas? This is going to be a very important scenario in the storm's life cycle with regarding whatever impact it might have to the East Coast.
Yeah, and a lot of people right now, even though I'm sure the local TV weathercasters have already made an allusion to this. A lot of people really aren't paying that much attention to it now, but I'm sure that as we get into the upcoming weekend, especially at the start of next week, this could loom rather large, and it could also. You and I both know, Joe, the mindset of executive producers and news directors at TV stations. They probably will say to themselves, hey, we need something to take people's minds off COVID-19, the baseball season, and a whole variety of other things. So why don't we talk about the potential of a storm, a hurricane coming up the eastern seaboard? So maybe not much news making now, but we'll be hearing about this. And you're right. We're gonna also be hearing about the problems that the local TV news anchors or weathercasters are going to have in trying to pronounce or give the exact pronunciation of this particular storm.
I
If I'm
can't.
having a problem looking at it phonetically, and you're having a problem, this is going to be interesting to see
I
how this
can't.
all
I
pans out.
can't wait. All right, so let's move forward on the upper air. Now, here's what I want everybody. Let's. I'm going to tell you what to look for. Okay, so you're going to look at the strength of the upper high. You're going to look at this upper low that is sitting in eastern Canada, and it's right coming onto the screen now. On the edge of the screen is another short wave that is moving into the northern plains. So you've got these three players that are part of all of this. And going into Thursday and Friday, you'll notice that the Atlantic ridge weakens, and the short wave, the upper low that is under south of James Bay, also weakens and opens up. So now you have this open trough that runs northwest, northeast, southwest. This part here that is back into the middle Mississippi Valley is going to be very important to the outcome, because that is going to eventually be what this may wind up steering around. And looking ahead, that northern shortwave pulls out, the trough here begins to amplify, and now you've got another, Joe, there's another shortwave, a strong shortwave that is swinging down from Canada out of Labrador that comes around and looks like it almost phases with this southern shortwave that stays in the lower Mississippi Valley. It almost looks like it's trying to phase. So now we're looking at, this is Monday evening, your tropical system is going to try and travel right up like this, in between the high that is out offshore and the trough that is out to the west. And of course, how this lines up is going to be so critical to whatever outcome that we're going to have, because if we wind up with something, if, for example, this northern shortwave were to overpower and say flatten all this out, where the flow is going to be more west-southwest, you're going to wind up with something that's going to do this, okay, where it's going to make the turn and then go out east-northeast. So this action that is happening here in southeastern Canada, back to the northern Great Lakes and into the lower Mississippi Valley, that trough that gets carved out there is going to be oh so important to the outcome of where this winds up. And again, are we going to have an entity that's going to be strengthening? Is it going to be something that's more than what we're seeing right now, which is just a broad low? That is also going to be part of this equation.
Okay, well, we'll see.
You're not
If you
happy.
think
I
it,
can tell you're
well,
not happy.
no, it's just that you're so thorough. I mean, what more is there for me to add?
You could totally disagree with me. I mean, it is possible. I mean, do you know that? I mean, I am looking at this right. I think uh, that northern stream is going to be so important, and it's been such a dominating feature here all summer long.
Right.
Or the
And
lack of it has been a dominating feature too.
I wish I had thought about this in advance. I would have liked to have looked at the upper air for Bell back in 1976, because I think this is kind of like what happened with Bell, that it got stuck in a corridor and literally came almost
All
straight
right, you know
north.
what? I can see if I can find something. We could probably find something.
Yeah,
Let me run through the European real fast, and then I want to just go to the parallel GFS. So here's the Europeans kind of got the same idea. Again, only in 24-hour increments, but you see how the European shortwave that pulls out of southeastern Canada and moves out east of Newfoundland, and now you've got this second arm that comes down through Hudson Bay, and it phases in with what's left of that southern stream shortwave, and then of course here is where you get a bit of a flatter look, and it's west southwest. But I also want to point out that the European keeps this thing very weak and pretty far to the south. It literally moves it right over all the big islands, so that by the time it gets out into the northeast, into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, there's virtually nothing left to it. So
right.
the Europeans' view is because of where it has the track being so far, much on the southern end of what the other models do. We can take a look also at the Canadian. And the Canadian did get an upgrade, Joe, and it seems to be behaving better where it's not spinning up everything that moves. So I'm not really, by the way, folks, I'm not showing you the surfaces yet, really, because the surface maps, all that does is that you just wind up focusing on what that map does, and then you wait till the next model run, and then you start focusing on what that model run map does. And I don't want, you don't want to do that. I prefer that you get it. If you get an understanding of what's going on in the upper air, the surface will take care of itself when we get there. So it's better to know what the players are upstairs, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to steer this thing. And here's the Canadian. Same idea. And in fact, if you look at that, if you look at the Canadian over the Dominican Republic, or just north of the Dominican Republic, is the tropical storm. And you can see how it reacts to the trough as that northern stream feature comes down, phases with that southern stream, and then the tropical system is lifted right up the east coast into that into the trough that's moving into southeastern Canada and Labrador. So all the models, Joe, all of them are on the same page
Right,
with how this plays out.
right.
And
So,
do we have the new parallel? We do not. So I'm going to look for, um, in the meantime, if we got any other questions you want to take on the chat board, so that while you're doing that, address those comments, and I'll take a look and see what I can find with Bell.
well, I do want to thank William Hubert for hitting super chat. He said $1 for every drop of rain I had. You most, you most
Four,
likely, you most
four
likely you had
drops.
today. You most likely you had today. Good thing it didn't rain hard. I'd be poor.
Yeah, no, I say that Bill's only a couple of miles from me, and yeah, we've been I've been kidding him about the fact that we seem to have a boilerplate over us. And there was a strong thunderstorm that I did notice in south of to our south late this afternoon and evening. A really small cell. Uh, I'm not exactly sure where it was. Maybe around between somewhere between Patchogue and Moriches. There was a really small cell, but uh, that was it. And in fact, the severe weather, the marginal risk of severe weather, I thought, by the way, that SPC would have reduced that this morning based on the fact that the models really weren't doing very much, but they didn't. I'm kind of surprised, but no matter. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm
Hey
trying to
Joe,
find.
if you go on the daily weather maps site with the NOAA library,
Hmm.
and you pick it out as a PDF. Don't go with the deja vu, because you don't want that. But I'm looking at the map for Sunday, August 8th, 1976. There's Bell, that's off of the Central Florida coast by about, oh, I'd say 250 miles. But the upper air shows this, and it's amazing. Here's an upper low over the Ohio Valley, and here's a big subtropical ridge of high pressure offshore. And Bell literally goes right through the right north, right up the corridor between these two systems, and it looks not too different than what we're talking about, in the coming days with this tropical system coming up.
I'm trying to find the link to that Q. What did I do?
If you go on Google and just type in daily weather maps, and then when you you know check in the list there, the list or the link that has NOAA library, and
Okay.
then you'll see what we're talking
All
about.
right, hang on one second. I'll do that in a moment. I was just looking for that site that we often go to. I seem to have lost the bookmark.
Yeah, this is NOAA Central Library,
All right,
National Oceanic and Atmospheric
hang
Administration.
on. We'll do it right now. So, okay, so daily weather maps. Come on. The daily weather maps Central Library, correct?
Right.
Okay, so I'll bring that up on the screen in a moment.
And you have a chance to go from three
Yeah.
different eras, 1871 to 1968. You won April 15th, 1968 to December 31st, 2002.
Right, so we're going to 1976.
Six.
Excuse
August,
me.
August, and the first on the list will be August 2nd to August 8th, and and make sure
Got it.
that you're at PDF. You don't want the deja vu.
Right.
Go PDF.
All taken care of, Mr. Rayo. I got it right there. So just give me 1 second to bring the PDF up as
And
it
like I said,
saves.
when you see both the surface, well, the surface has Bell, well off to the east of where this system would be. This system presumably is going to skim across Florida or touch Florida. The Bell was, I'd say, about 250 miles east of Florida. But the upper air is the thing that really is impressive, in the sense that you have the big ridge out to sea. You have the upper low coming down from the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley, and Bell just decided, okay, I guess I'll go in between the two. And as you well remember, that one went straight up north and hit central Long Island, right
And
on Fire Island.
Bell did not form until the disturbance that became Bell got into the Bahamas.
Right.
And I'm just looking at I got the maps up here, so let's bring them up on the screen. So here is, okay, so we're looking at, all right, this is what day? I'm trying to figure out what day this is Tuesday. You can see the upper air for Tuesday. Then we'll go to the upper air for Wednesday. And you got this weak trough that's moving out. You see the vortex that's up in northern Canada with the flow around that. Moving on to Friday. Now here's where you start to get the dying cold front, because I remember we had a stalled frontal boundary, and you'll notice here now the upper air, you're starting to see this trough that's stretching down from Labrador. And then on Saturday, now you see that upper low, Joe, right, that forms it forms in southern Michigan. The low that is east of the Bahamas, now that represents Bell. And the Atlantic Ridge, the weakness in between. You had an upper high in New Mexico, upper high off the Atlantic trough, extending down through the Great Lakes. And then when we move on to Sunday, now suddenly you've got this upper low all by itself down in southern Michigan and extending southward, and a mostly southerly flow along the East Coast. This is how you bring a storm up the East Coast. I think what we're looking at this time around is a bit more dynamic in the upper air with the 500. The upper air features at 18,000 feet seem to be much deeper than what we're seeing here from Bell. So that adds an interesting little angle to it when we get to the weekend, just to see how the upper air interacts with all of this.
Right. This is now in part an analog forecast. I mean, we're trying to, you know, and you and I have been in doing this for so long that in our memory or in our brains, we can just pick out like a Rolodex in our heads.
Right.
Like, when was the last time I saw something like this and associated with a tropical system? And immediately Bell came right into my mindset here. And yeah, you're right. It is a bit different, but it's still in the same. It's got the same concept, the same idea as to what happened all those years ago in 1976.
No, one of the things I want to also just touch on in terms of we were talking about with regards to strengthening, I just want to go back to, I'm going to use the GFS. I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but I mentioned earlier about the fact that the environment is not necessarily ideal. And one of the reasons is that we have this front. Oh, I can't do it with that view. Hang on a second. That's my mistake. This is what the 18Z. I mean, you guys can all know. You guys can look at this on your own, of course. And so me not showing to you and showing it to you is not going to keep it a secret. But you see on this particular run, differences from the earlier run in that it's further east. It's much more developed on the GFS, and then it just kind of shoots it up the coast. You see it here riding up. It never really gets very deep on the GFS. So it's kind of, again, another indicator that the upper air is not ideal. And taking a look at that, just so that we can showcase the problem, we've got this weather front that's coming through on Thursday that's going to drop down into Virginia, North Carolina. And I think, Joe, what happens is because of that, let me just roll it back a few days. And now we'll just have to wait for it to load. Okay, so you guys can see where the tropical system is, and that's right in there. So there's your tropical system that is north of the Dominican Republic. We're looking at upper air winds and wind shear. So you've got these strong southwesterly winds just to the north and west of this, and they're fairly strong, but they do migrate and weaken as the system moves up into the Bahamas. But once it gets here, it gets a little dicey because you do have, at least initially, going into Friday, the environment up off the Atlantic coast, you actually have northeast winds coming down in the upper atmosphere. So there's actually a little bit of northeasterly shear. That winds up disappearing, but then you get into some southwesterly shear here coming from the northeast Caribbean, the northeast Gulf of Mexico, and riding up the Atlantic coast. Now, I will say, Joe, having looked at prior runs, that the shear, the environment here looks less hostile than the prior runs did. So maybe that's the reason why the GFS has got a more of an identifiable feature than it did in the last 3 or 4 runs of it. So that's something to consider if that trend continues when we look at the next sequence of model runs that they'll be coming out tonight and into tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. You mentioned a few moments ago about how the GFS, and as I said this at the top of the show, that the GFS has been showing this more as an amorphous or more diffuse system as it gets closer to the southeast coastline, as opposed to several days ago where this thing looked like a solid, tropical cyclone coming up,
Right.
in our direction. But things are going to change. Things are going to evolve,
And they're going to evolve some more. Now
Yeah.
let's quickly go through our weather the next couple of days, because we got this weak weather front, whatever you want to call it, that moved through tonight and didn't do anything with regards to showers and storms. And I noticed, Joe, the dew points. I guess if you cut Pennsylvania and New Jersey in half and go northward, it looks like the dew points do come down a little bit tomorrow afternoon, just slightly. And then it looks like we have a stronger front that's coming through late Thursday. And there's a little wave that develops on there Thursday night, because the models are bringing up some showers through Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, through New Jersey and Long Island Thursday night into early Friday morning. Then that goes by. And now, of course, here's your setup for Saturday with a low in Arkansas. That's your southern shortwave. There's an east-west frontal boundary. Those are the showers that you see off the North Carolina coast. And then the question is, with that trough swinging around, that northern part of that trough coming down and around, is there going to be enough here to pull this up the eastern seaboard in some fashion? And as I said, on this last GFS run, it does give us a swipe, although it never really intensifies into anything substantial. That was the parallel GFS today. The parallel GFS went to town, Joe. I don't know if you saw it,
No, I did
but
not. I,
the parallel's got a 960 something pressure running right up the coast and moving over eastern Long Island into southeastern New England.
this is like the second. This is like the second. This is like the second parallel GFS we've had in the last 18 months, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Pretty soon they're going to have a GFS on its side, and they'll have to call it the perpendicular GFS, the GFS that only works at right angles.
Right.
Actually, that was that run I showed you the other night where the low went out east of North Carolina, went straight east to about 6, and then moved straight north. Yeah, that's the perpendicular GFS.
Yeah.
All right, so you get the idea, folks. We could go on all night and show you every model. It's not going to resolve anything. I think the takeaway is we've got a tropical system that we're going to be dealing with in one form or another, and it's just going to be a question of just watching this whole thing evolve. So here's a question, Joe, from Johnny Quest. How accurate is WPC? Because they might show an inch and a half of rain for the next 7 days, and yet when you're dealing with these summertime issues, you've got thunderstorms where any one spot could wind up with 3 or 4 inches of rain, and everywhere else gets very little.
It's really a no-win situation. I mean, if you're looking at this time of the year, especially if they're doing this with kind of a broad brush, you're absolutely right. Any one splotch of convection could very easily the precipitable water involved with even a small zone of thunderstorm activity could bring down a quickie 3 or 4 inches in one small narrow spot. How do you factor that into a broad area? So you just try to do your best. You can't. Yeah.
I just excuse me. I just think it needs to be understood that in the summertime, that local, some of these thunderstorms are going to produce ridiculous amounts that you can never put on a broad map of the United States. You just can't. So I think you just have to go in with that understanding that some places could get hammered when you get situations that warrant getting hammered, and other places not so much.
We haven't seen yet, at least in the Northeast this summer, as opposed to other summers, those crazy scenarios where one particular city or town gets walloped with like 8 or 9 inches of rain in 3 hours. We haven't seen that happen yet, but certainly it is not out of the question, especially when you consider how juicy the air has been overhead in recent days around here.
By the way, Douglas is now a tropical storm and weakening, as it's now it's well past Hawaii and headed for the international date line. It's at 24.5 north, 169.9 west. Now, I don't know if you picked up on this, Joe. I have no idea how to pronounce.
The national monument.
It's hold on. It's 4, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's 17 letters long. Papahana. Papahana Mokuakea. I don't know. I'm not trying to be funny here. It's just I looked at that and I'm like, whoa. I guess I could go to Google and just put in there and say, how do you say this? Why don't you do that? Go to Google, the Google translator, and put in the tropical storm name, and put the volume up, and you could hear what the pronunciation is.
I'd have to go right now. I've got my own.
I'll do it. Okay.
Whole area. I've got like 3 different windows open here because I'm.
All right, hang on. I'll do it. I just realized I could do that. Hang on a second. All right. In the meantime, by the way, potential tropical cyclone 9 on the 8 o'clock advisory is still potential tropical cyclone 9. 14.2, 58.7, moving west-northwest at 25 miles an hour.
Wow.
1,007 millibar lowest pressure, top winds 40 miles per hour. So I don't see that there's been any changes in the no changes in the watches and warnings and the advisory. So you've got tropical storm warnings up for Puerto Rico, Vieques, Culebra, the U.S. Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, Antigua, Barbuda, Montserrat, St. Kitts, Nevis, Anguilla, Guadeloupe, Martinique, St. Martin, St. Bartholomew, Saba, St. Eustatius, St. Martin, Dominica, and the Dominican Republic, and from Cabo Quasado northward along the northern coast of the Dominican Republic Haiti border, now under a tropical storm warning. Just to update that from the 8 o'clock advisory, and then we'll go to Google. Let me go to Google Translator. Let's try that. Okay, how do you pronounce? What is it? IS spelling. Isaiah. How do you spell it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still working on the Hawaiian.
How do you spell it? Isaiah. How does it spell? ISAISES?
I think so, but I'll have to put the Hawaiian thing aside now and go back to the Atlantic basin.
Okay, I can't seem to get this to work right. I guess I'm falling under pressure here. So never mind. We'll figure it out. We'll come back to it tomorrow. So let's
ISAIAS. There's a lot of A's here.
All right, I'll do it off. I'll do it when we're done, and then
two sets of A's, two sets of S's. Yeah. In fact, it's made up of 3 letters: an I, an S, and an A.
All right, we'll figure it out tomorrow. By the way, the chairman pointed out to me earlier that we got a low this morning at Central Park was 81, which shattered the record of 78. So this is the highest low for this date. That's cool. And the all-time is 84. So 81 was the low this morning at the park. Didn't even get under 80. And what
was the old record? Was 78?
For the day was 78. Correct. The old
Anybody have the year
record.
For that?
I always love those record low highs and record high lows. And the high today was 93 in New York City, so it did not break a record. Do you have some questions left over for me from Sunday?
I will check. It'll mean trying to get to if there was a question. I don't think there was though, but I'll hang on for a second. Let me find something from Mr. Briller if he did send me anything. Scott, you know if you send me something or not, but
he said he did on.
I like how I leave something alone, and then I get another message saying Scott Briller sent a message, Joe Ray, you haven't responded yet. The reason why I never responded is that if I respond, then I'm going to lose it.
Well, that's true.
Bro Jeffrey, Sunday morning. How many times? No, I don't think.
Did you give me questions on Sunday?
Yes. How many Grammys has Elvis Presley won?
Yeah, we did do those questions.
Yeah.
So we did the Sunday questions. Okay, so then we'll just wait till tomorrow and we'll get the next set because I don't have anything. I didn't get anything today, so no, I don't have any Briller Jeopardy. And by the way, it's coming up on 8 o'clock Eastern time. David Schwartz, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it greatly. Very, very much so. Rose Violet, I'm confused. The Weather Channel shows it going through Florida, but these models show it going up the East Coast. Will I be affected? Okay, so Rose, let me just say, as I said from the beginning, you can't look at something 5 or 6 days ahead of time and make any kind of equivocal, solid statement that it's definitely going to hit Florida. The Weather Channel is going to show you what the Hurricane Center has, and that's based on their forecast, which obviously can change and is fluid. Plus, we don't even know what we're going to be dealing with by the time it gets there. So I really wouldn't put. I think at this stage of the game, and I'm guessing Joe will probably agree with me on this, is it's there. That under certain circumstances that it could very well have an impact on weather in South Florida this weekend, and that we're in the pay attention phase.
Right.
We're not in anything beyond that. Okay,
Right.
so is it possible? Yes. Is it probable at this point? We're not at a place where we can say that the probability is high.
Even the even the maps that Levi Cohen show. Yeah, I think in the upper right hand corner, the one that shows the track along the eastern
Yes, it
seaboard.
says on there, do not use this as a tool to make decisions.
Right.
And that can't be emphasized enough. And we say it all the time here when it comes to tropical storms and hurricanes. When the time comes for decisions to be made, it's your local officials that you should be considering and talking to, and your local National Weather Service forecast office for information, and the National Hurricane Center, weather.gov or nhc.noaa.gov. So make sure you've got those two websites down and as sources for information when the time comes.
Incidentally, Joe, somebody on the chat board asked, and this goes back maybe almost to the beginning, and I forgot who asked the question. He was wanting to know on my YouTube channel,
Right.
is there a way to get super chats there? And I'm figuring that that's not going to be available until after I hit 1,000 subscribers. Is that correct?
Right, you need 1,000 subscribers. So
Right.
go to Joe's YouTube channel, which is Joe Rayo Weather, and make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel so we can get him up to 1,000. Peter Bicker, what is the difference between a potential tropical cyclone and a tropical depression? I did probably earlier. Maybe you joined late. So the what we have here is a broad low that doesn't have a tight closed off circulation center where you've got convection around the center itself. That is a characteristic of a warm core system. We've been noting the last day or two how this thing looks like it's got a giant donut in the middle where the lowest pressure is, you're seeing very little convection. So once we start seeing on satellite loops overnight or when they send the next recon, if they start to see convection developing near where the lowest center of pressure is, and you start to get winds that are around that center and that they can close it off, that's when they would make it a tropical depression. And obviously, if the winds are over gale force, they're going to make that a tropical storm. So the purpose of the potential tropical cyclone is just for systems like this in the Atlantic, where you get them, they're on their way. You know they're going to get. It looks like they're going to get there. There's probably a 80 or 90% chance that it's going to become a tropical storm. But because they're close to land areas where they're going to be impacted with tropical storm force winds, the Hurricane Center kind of, lets the news out that, hey, we're looking at this. It looks like it's going to become a tropical storm. We're going to put tropical storm warnings up because of the threat. To give you a little bit more time. So it's a way of getting a leg up rather than wait till wind up upgrading this thing to a tropical storm and putting up warnings when the thing is basically right on top of you. So these potential tropical cyclones, I think, do serve a useful purpose.
And as I said also at the onset, the discussion. Although I haven't seen the. I wonder if they put an 8 o'clock discussion up. No, they just stayed with the.
Yeah, I did the advisory a little while ago. They left everything alone.
Yeah, and this was written by Brown, one of the forecasters at NHC, National Hurricane Center. But again, it's a long discussion, and my theory is that they simply just want to, stress again, potential cyclone 9. It's likely tropical storm conditions for the Leeward Islands, Virgin Islands. The long range tracks and the intensity forecast are most uncertain, more than usual. The system does not have a well-defined center yet, blah, 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 blah. So they're really just saying, all right, it's out there, but don't put too much emphasis on the tracks and the information yet, because it's everything still has to come together. So
Daniel Fitzsimmons wants to know, is there a weather app for historical weather? Not that I know of. I haven't seen one. I don't know of any. But I would think that daily weather maps link, Joe, would probably help him. So I'm going to bring that up again. I'll put it up on the chat board, Daniel. You might want to take a look at that.
Right.
Because, after you go back a handful of years, things get less technical and a little more primitive from the standpoint of what's available. But take a look at these because these
I
go
don't know
way
about
back.
I don't know about you, Joe, but when I bet this goes back now into the late '60s or early '70s or whatever, I used to actually go down to the local candy store, Angie's, by the way, in when I lived in Throgs Neck. I'd go there, I'd buy the New York Times for 10 cents, bring it home, and literally I would throw the entire New York Times out, except I would cut out the weather page. And the weather page was most important because back then, back in the day, the weather maps they showed in the New York Times was not this stuff that they show now, which evolved out of the USA Today maps from all these years ago back in the
Right.
80s. It used to be the actual US Weather Bureau maps with isobars and wind barbs and the whole bit. And I must have kept like 3 years worth of maps. I cut the maps out, I put them in a boot box, and
Hmm.
that was my archive, my
That was
weather
the only weather
archive.
maps you could get your hands on.
Correct, unless I had the bucks to subscribe to the daily weather map page, which would come in the mail. But this was a lot easier and a lot cheaper too. And that's how I used to look at the maps, make my own forecasts, and I used to, I even used to put the weather on the board at the blackboard at school, based
Uh,
upon my
as did I. As did
and
I.
and now you can't really now if a kid is trying to do that, he's basing it not on the actual National Weather Service maps, which you can get off the internet anyway, but he's basing it on this op art or this modern art of the oranges and the blues and the reds and everything else. And it's
Joe, I've said this how many times, and I'll say it again. We were born in the wrong time.
well, we
Eh,
weren't.
No, but I'm saying if we were born 30 years later or so, we would be participating in all this technical stuff in a much bigger way. Um, but I've always embraced it to an extent as the stuff came along. But at the end of the day, those who have this now, 40 years from now, they're going to be saying the same. The youngins are going to be saying the same thing when the technology changes even more, and they'll probably put like a chip in your brain, and they'll just
Goodbye.
send you the weather maps, and they'll show up in your glasses, so you get to see them here. I mean, it's
But
all.
the great part about the daily weather map page with these maps that go all the way back to 1871, there was a time I used to go down to the Mid Manhattan Library to look at weather maps from the New York Times now, and there were no weather maps available from 1942 to 1945. They did not print weather maps in the newspaper, and they had barely anything in terms of weather forecast because they were afraid that the enemy, the Germans or the Japanese or whoever, were going to use those maps to try to, you know, do maneuvers or something like that. And you were not allowed on radio to give too much information out about weather back during World War II because of that. It
Yes.
was like really weird.
Well, you had the
One
Great
time,
Atlantic Hurricane came up the East Coast during that time. I
I,
somebody remember telling me a story about how getting the information out about that was a bit odd and a bit strange because of the war blackout.
in the 1940s, earlier mid 1940s, Henry Morgan, not Harry Morgan, who played Colonel Potter on MASH, but Henry Morgan, who was on a lot of game shows, and he was also a noted commentator on radio. He had a show on WOR radio, and he said, "Let's take a look at the latest weather right now." And right now, and all of a sudden, you heard a crash, and he said, "Well, the barometer is falling," and it just fell. Now he thought that was very funny, and it might have been mildly amusing or whatever. The next day, somebody from the U.S. government contacted him and told him that was a no-no, and he said that was just a fun little bit. I said the barometer is falling, and the guy from the government said, "Yes, but what if it was right, or what was it? What if it was true?" I mean, that was the mentality. You think it's crazy now? Back in the 1940s, they was thinking crazy stuff as well.
Um, so Alan ALEMBIC 65. Any insight on YouTube recently eliminating listings for mobile and web streams on live channels, so no way to see what smaller streams exist in a spontaneous way? I haven't seen anything that says that. I just did a quick Google search on that. In terms of live streaming on mobile, you need at least that magic 1,000 subscribers. So clearly that's not an issue for this channel, because we're way over that, and it soon won't be an issue for Joe's channel, because you're going to go to Joe Rayo Weather and bring him
Hey,
one
look,
subscriber closer to 1,000. So that's Joe Rayo Weather once
it's
this live
my
stream is done.
it's my birthday on Sunday. So now all of you who are watching right now, go to all of your friends or all your families and say, look, there's this channel on YouTube. It's called Joe Rayo Weather. Just subscribe. And maybe on Sunday for my birthday, we'll make it over 1,000. We're only 140 away from that. So, if the word spreads out and all of you start, telling all of your friends, just go and subscribe to this channel. I've done everything short of. I was thinking of also, Joe. I was thinking also I filled the hummingbird feeders today,
Uh-huh.
and I'm saying I ought to do a primer on how to attract hummingbirds. If you have the feeder.
Hey, I've done cooking stuff.
Yeah,
In fact, I made my own. I made my own creamy Caesar dressing today. It came out really good.
really.
It was very easy. Very
Now
easy.
don't put that on the hummingbird feeder. The hummingbirds won't like
No,
that.
they won't like that, especially the sour cream part of it.
Yes.
So let's see. Um, Christina Pedia saying to Allenbeck, could it be that the uploaders hiding them? Long live streams really mess up the channel views. I watched several years put live streams. Yeah, I'm going to dig around on that to try to get a little bit more information. Johnny Quest wants to know, Joe, are there any interesting things in the night sky that we should be paying attention to?
You probably have seen that they are promoting AccuWeather. Most notably, is promoting a double meteor shower tonight, and it's two really weak, run-of-the-mill, not even worth looking for because there's so few meteors, and it's also a shower that is basically really more for the southern United States and places south of the equator. But they're promoting it as, I think, fireballs, and you can take a look at it. But really, the main event coming up in less than a couple of weeks, on the night of August 11th, is the annual
The
performance of the Perseid
Perseid.
meteor showers. They come along every year in mid-August.
And that's the
This year,
annual performance of cloudy skies around here, but go on.
right? It's always been cloudy. I try to keep the enthusiasm down because it always turns out the weather is the same thing: cloudy, foggy, rainy, showery, whatever. But maybe we'll catch a break this year, and as we get closer, we'll obviously, allude to that more and more, I suppose.
Timothy Veltman says you should set a subscriber goal for 1,000, and when you get there, they'll shave your head.
Which
And
reminds me, last night I saw on the Twilight Zone, 12:30 last night, Joe, the Telly Savalas episode with Talking Tina,
oh, my name is Talking Tina, and I'm
and
going
I'm
to
going to
kill
kill you.
you. Oh God! So Chuck Cardillo says that his birthday is on August 4th.
Okay, very good. You know who also was born on August 4th? One of the Miracle Mets, Cleon Jones. He was
Ah,
born on August, and by this time, Cleon's probably approaching 80 years old, I would think. But anyway, and my brother-in-law, my wife has two brothers, and the oldest brother, John, he'll be celebrating on August 4th as well. A lot of people celebrating their birthdays in early August, Joe. Must have been a cold month of
it
December.
must have been. By the way, the new parallel GFS is starting to come out now. And it looks like the old parallel GFS shooting up a fairly well developed cyclone. I only have it out. I'm not going to bring it up on the screen because we got to go. It's coming up on 8:15. But at 144 hours, which is next Monday afternoon, it's got a pretty wrapped up cyclone there, right over the outer banks of North Carolina, moving rapidly northeastward. So we'll leave it at that. And don't forget, folks, if you tuned in late or perhaps you didn't have time to to see the whole live stream, you can always view this as a podcast, which it will be up in about an hour. So the podcasts of this show will be up on Anchor, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify, and on a whole bunch of other places. And I think we're on iTunes, although they haven't told me yet for sure. But as I said earlier, I've noticed some of the folks that are listening to the podcast are doing it through iTunes. So tomorrow, 7 o'clock Eastern time is our regular time
Yes,
on
sir.
most weekdays. We took a break yesterday because we were on 7 days in a row, and both of us needed a little bit of a day off. I will have a special Weather in 10 video tomorrow afternoon for my Patreon members on my subscription site. That's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's $2 a month, and you get a lot of extra weather stuff, and you can message me anytime. It's loads of fun. So be sure, if you're not part of it, think about it. A lot of folks that are on the regulars here on the chat board are part of Patreon, and I appreciate their memberships greatly. Thank you so much for
King of all
supporting
media,
me.
folks. King of
Who?
all weather media.
Who?
Right?
Who?
You.
I sound like an owl. I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere. What can I tell you? All right, folks, have a great night. Thanks for being